because a lot of times in those moments when you are at the cusp, kind of when I feel like the water's up to here and your head is just kind of tilting up above it, it really feels like you can't breathe.
Today's guest has faced darkness head on and somehow managed to laugh through it. Sarah Marie Shulak is a speaker, artist, and mental health advocate who wears many hats: HR professional, not for profit co founder, and soon to be published author of Dead Serious: How Death Made Me Laugh at Life, coming in April 2026. A survivor of sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, Sarah has turned her pain into purpose, using raw honesty and humor to help others heal and grow without losing themselves in the process. Her story is about resilience, grace, and the simple truth that sometimes the best medicine is a good laugh through the tears. Sarah, welcome to Positive Vibes with Nikki Dennis.
Yes, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
And we're so happy to have you with us, Sarah, to share your story. So, your story is one of a deep transformation. Can you take us back to the moment when everything changed, when you realized you wanted to fight for your life, not against it?
100%. And I feel like when I tell people that I have a story that involves multiple near-death experiences, they really expect one of those to be that wake-up call, that obvious wake-up call where I fell
Mm,
asleep at the wheel or I had an incident that I shouldn't have walked away from that I did, and that would have given me that fervor for life. But it was actually really more cliche than that, really more tragic and heartbreaking, and just love lost of a relationship that was really not working out. But what I realized through the therapy and healing that came after it is that I was just chasing patterns in my life. And I
mm,
kept gravitating towards chaos because chaos is what felt safe. And actually, the
mm,
first time I was able to be published was part of an anthology book. So it was actually with 15 women authors total. And one of those women included was my mother. And so we got to do that project together. And we each wrote just a little chapter. And the book was called The Wisdom Before Me. And the prompt was to write something to an earlier version of yourself based on what you'd learned on that journey.
mm-hmm.
And when I did that chapter, I was only in my 20s. So to look back and reflect was a little early to have, that type
Yeah.
of reflection. But, it was a great experience. And that was the subject of that chapter was chaos, feeling comfortable. And
Mm,
I think that I just, in that relationship, had gotten to what I referred to feeling like a husk of a person, just kind of a hollow shell going through the motions of living. And it was really that moment that said, if I don't change this, nothing is going to change. Um, in a particularly cinematic or maybe anticlimactic moment, I actually was living at the time just around the corner from a church. I mean, the wind would hit both of us at the same time. It was so close. And
mm,
I remember I wasn't involved in the congregation. I just knew that it existed and it was really nearby. And there was literally a hurricane on the way because we live in Florida in the United States, and so it's hurricane central. And there was literally a hurricane on the way, but there was a fight going on in the house, and I didn't want to be there. And I literally drove out of the house and just kind of sat in this parking lot and was like on the doorstep of the church and hoping that some miracle would send someone to check on me and oh, what do you need, you know,
yeah.
sister? No one came, and
Mm,
which is obvious because there was a hurricane coming, and it was just moments like that that made me
yeah.
realize I have to be my own advocate. That doesn't mean that I have to be alone on this journey and that there's not resources, but that fire of, okay, this is enough's enough, and I'm done, and I'm ready to make changes really started then.
Yeah. No, just picking up on what you were saying there is that you're comfortable with the chaos. And it's something that if you're growing up in that, that's something that leads you to that pattern as well. In that keeps on happening in your life because you're comfortable with it. I remember my mother
Right.
said to me once, never get comfortable with being unhappy. And I've always kept that in the back of my head and always moved on when I felt unhappy, to say, well, yeah, we need to advocate for ourselves and do what makes us feel happy. So I can really, yeah, feel what you were saying then. So you've walked
Mhm.
through life through addiction, assault, and even suicidal thoughts. Looking back, what helped you start rebuilding piece by piece?
Well, I want to maybe clarify a small misnomer with the language because I know in my bio I do use the language suicide survivor. It feels like a very strange phrase to use in general.
Mm,
To be honest, I definitely have seen all of my waves of depression and whatnot. But in the book, particularly impactful story that I share is actually the fact that my grandmother commits suicide. So in
no.
that sense, it's to be a survivor of someone that was lost to suicide, kind of
Mm,
in that realm. And what I like to explain about her story, because it is tragic. I mean, anything that ends like that is just so devastating to everyone around it.
mm,
And really, it's almost the tragic butterfly effect of the ripples that go out from that
yeah.
loss. And my mother was only 10 years old when she lost her mother. That's when it happened. My mother was 10. And so as
Mm,
we reflect through the book and we talk about just the impact that had on the whole tapestry, particularly in my mother's mothering style, that if she only had a mom up till 10 years old, what was her point of reference for kindness, for mothering,
yeah.
for being a parent and having that kind of discipline? So she was really raised by her sisters. She was the youngest of six and had a number of sisters and brothers, and she lived with them and had different relationships that grew throughout the years. But it's that point that you don't end up with the same family that other kids have at school when you only have one set of grandparents, and there's this kind of lopsided, what's my identity? Am I ashamed of
Mm,
this? Am I empowered by it? Because a lot of times, especially when it comes to topics of suicide, there's so much shame wrapped around it, even in the family, to admit what it is. So
mm,
it was called a heart attack for a number of years, and the story was different until we started poking holes in it and realizing what the true cause was. So I'm a big advocate for talking about suicide awareness, whether
mm.
it's, my own thoughts that kind of go into the darkness, or, they're people whose families have been ripped apart by people's decisions.
Yeah, and that's a good space to advocate in because it's always been that silent word that no one or subject that no one wanted to talk about. So well done for you being an
Thank
advocate
you.
in this space. So what role did humor or perspective play in your healing, especially when it felt heavy?
I think one of the things about talking about humor and trauma together is the sensitivity of it all, and
Yeah,
to not make a mockery of anything or be patronizing or to, laugh in the face of those things, to
no.
not validate them first. So I feel like you have to just start with the raw emotion, because I'm definitely not out here trying to be an advocate for toxic positivity and just throwing a
Mm,
smile on and faking it through. I feel like that is what we're accustomed to hearing about. And so my way of explaining it, um, my way of incorporating humor now is to live almost like a whimsical life and to incorporate whimsy into what you do throughout your day, because
mm,
um, it's you still have to deal with the pain, you still have to deal with frustration and anger.
mhm,
But when things are annoying, to think about it in a creative way that says, well, me taking out the trash is a side quest or something like that.
mm,
And this person might annoy me at work, but I'm going to picture them like a troll under the bridge. And every time I go past, so, it doesn't ignore the issue. It doesn't sweep it under the rug. It says, if I'm going to have to deal with this, how can I almost gamify it or find a way to just, and it's not even compartmentalizing or, trying to be manipulative to yourself. It's almost reframing and reshaping it and saying, how can I smile a little bit more? And they might really
mm,
be unrelated. It might be the fact that what you're dealing with is so heavy that you do have to put it aside and say, I'm going to go to yoga. I'm going to go to the
mm.
sauna. I'm going to watch a comedian that I love or something. And not in an escapism kind of way, but because I know I'm dealing with this, I'm giving myself that and feeling that balance in your healing journey.
Yeah, it's those real acts of kindness to yourself and showing that self-love to yourself
Mm,
in times of need. You know, we would do it to our best friends, so should do it to ourselves. So the
100%.
title, yeah. The title of your up and coming memoir, Dead Serious: How Death Made Me Laugh at Life, is powerful but also intriguing. What inspired you to write it?
Well, I think that in a lot of these people think about memoirs and they think about old people sitting on their
Mm,
porches who've had these long legacy lives of success and they're in that rocking chair and they're imparting this wisdom on their younger generations. And I just don't feel like I have that long, not in a pessimistic way, but in a sense that there have been so many near-death experiences in my life. I feel so grateful to
mm,
have what I consider this borrowed time to be living and to be influencing others. You could make those jokes about feeling like a cat with nine lives. And I think that when I've always been passionate about reading books, and obviously I had that chapter writing experience with my mother. So I had the taste for writing and writing
yeah.
projects, and I knew I wanted to pursue a book. It's just one of those bucket list things that I knew I had a book in me. But then where was my theme? Where
Yeah.
was my success story? Where was my look, I made $1 million, or I have the thing that's going to unlock your brain? I don't have that answer. I just have my stories. So when I set out to figure out what the book was going to be about, it was almost that sad kind of funny to keep looking at my stories and be like, well, I almost died here, and then these people died here, and these people almost died. So it actually
Mm,
became very apparent to me that so many themes throughout our family were related to death, and it seemed so taboo. But that's
mm,
also what I became known for in my family, in like that lovingly black sheep kind of way of like I'm the one who can, be a little count devil's advocate. I'm the one who can kind of push the norm. I'm the one who they
mm.
expect to be a little off the rails doing her own thing. And so of course my book is I'm going to be smiling on the podcast and go, my book's about death, like because it really is. And the more that we can
Yeah.
find the lightness in our heart to not mock it, but to find the fact that you can still laugh even when really big dark things are happening. That's
Yeah.
what gets us through them because it's all temporary.
Yeah. So just further on your writing, how did it become part of your healing process?
I really have to attribute a lot of the healing that happened during the memoir writing with the book, the publishing house that
Mm,
I'm working with. So I love to tell their story. I will, scream about it from the mountaintops. But the publishing house is called Soul Speak Press. And the
mhm,
woman who started it is an incredible woman. Her name is Jessica Buchanan. She actually was very She was a bit of a household name back in or the early 2000s. I think it was 2008 or 9. I won't get her
mhm,
dates right. But her big story is that she was working in Africa and she was kidnapped by Somali pirates and she was held captive. It was the two Americans who were kidnapped and held at
mm,
ransom. And she was actually saved by SEAL Team 6 at the orders of President Obama. And,
mhm,
that's just an incredible story to have lived through. So she came back from that experience, needed her own catharsis, wrote her own book, and then
mm.
said, this was so powerful to me. I want to start this boutique publishing house that focuses on women who have slightly grittier stories that other people may not want to touch. It might not be their
Yeah.
cup of tea. And she said, I'm not afraid of these stories that really bring up uncomfortable subjects.
Yeah.
So I had been following her on Instagram. I saw that they had the publishing house. I submitted an idea and said, if you don't ask, the worst they can say is no. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't paid anything yet. Let's give it a shot. They loved my idea. Their editors really helped me refine it into a storyline because where I initially pitched it, it was almost like a chicken soup for the soul book back from the early 90s, where it
Mm.
was just like story, vignette, story. Um, and where I had organized it maybe was not necessarily the best experience for the reader. So I did the process of kind of word vomiting all of my stories out, and their
Mm.
editor helped me refine that and neatly curate it into a really incredible art piece. If nothing else, I'm just so proud of the craftsmanship.
Yeah. So what did you learn about yourself through the process, sharing your story so openly?
Well, one of the hardest things that I realized when I was writing different parts of the book was to look at a story that I originally wanted to include and say, is this just something that I need to get off my chest? Is this just something that I could have told my
Mm.
therapist, but here it ended up because I really loved the way that I was telling the story. And it might be, well written and colorful and vibrant, but it was that editor being able to use that scalpel and say, hey, this is really great, but it's a little bit of a distraction. We don't know where you're going with this.
Mm,
And so for me, it was also reflective of I have to what's really tricky about being so young and writing a memoir is that you don't have much runway to catch the reader up to where you are right now. You have to
mm,
kind of decide where you're ending it, especially since some of these experiences have come up to very recently, you know.
yeah,
And so it has been very fascinating in my daily life to catch myself from a lesson that I had to kind of write about and narrate to the reader in the book, and then have that aha moment in my
yeah.
daily life and say, oh, this is an example of me following a previous pattern. Oh, or in this
Mm,
moment, I can be more gentle with myself. And so it's really just slowing down. That's the book has probably done the most for just having me and I was already very, very self-reflective and introspective just as a kid and growing up and up until now. But now it feels more purposeful
mm,
and it feels like it's for me. And one of your previous guests, whose episode I was just watching, Jackie, she has a
mm,
very similar story about not waiting for rock bottom to choose her
yeah.
sobriety and making that choice for herself. And there was just so many similarities to that where I just decided, this is my time to really do this, um, and kind of take charge with it.
Yeah, well, good for you. So, Sarah, you often say you want people to get better, not bitter. What does that look like in real life when someone is so deep in grief or recovery?
I think what people often don't talk about when it comes to, whether it's healing in general or probably specifically female, women healing is anger.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there is such an intertwining of, grief, anger, pain, anger,
Mm,
heartbreak, anger. You can't think of some of those emotions without thinking about how there's almost a rage.
yeah.
And so on some other podcasts, I've shared that I was actually involved very heavily in martial arts through my young
Hmm.
adulthood. And that contributed to some of the chronic pain and the ailments that I ended up with because I was so physically active. I was kicking things, I was doing mixed martial arts and training for cage fighting because
Yeah.
that's what I thought I
Wow.
was going to do. Right. And so I realized once I wasn't able to train like that anymore because I was injured. And so I had to take away the fighting. And then my life was kind of in this tailspin of really my own choices that were catching up to me. And so I had to take away drinking. And so now I can't hit anybody and I can't drink. And now I'm left with those emotions. And
Yeah.
now there's no magic wand where sobriety makes your life like a Disney movie after you just, cut alcohol out of your life. It leaves you with everything that you're left of your character traits and how you treat people and how you respond to
Mm,
conflict or challenge. And I feel like that's been the biggest reflection is to say, how do I process this anger? How do I let it exist and hold space for it, but not keep it
yeah.
with me? Because I feel like that's where we store a lot of anger in our bodies, whether it's in our jaws or our shoulders or whatever. And it's not healthy for us. And we're the ones who are going to end up with the ulcers, right? Not the people that we're
Hmm.
worrying about or not the situations that are never going to happen. And so that's why it feels so easy these days to get jaded and look at everything that either happens to you or happens in the world and just be mad about it and hold that
Mm,
tension. And that's why I say it has to be get better, not bitter, because
mm.
we're on that path to healing.
Yeah, I love that saying, but I'm having trouble visualizing you as a cage fighter right now. It just doesn't align with you, I don't think.
I'm way too bubbly.
Oh, and you got a beautiful energy. I just can't see you in that environment, but I'm sure you did very
Clearly,
well.
I won a lot. No, I'm kidding.
So can you share a moment when you caught yourself laughing or feeling joy again after everything that you went through?
Yeah, I think that wow, there's so many different examples because they kind of light up in different moments. But
Yeah.
I think that let's think of a recent one. Um, no, I'll do one that's kind of in the middle. So it wasn't at the end, kind of where I am these days, but it's probably when I started to realize that it's not all quicksand, right? Because there's that
Yeah.
feeling where you feel so overwhelmed with stress and trauma and
Hmm.
your nervous system is all fried and you just feel like you're just so overwhelmed and overstimulated. Um, It was actually one of the first times that I sought talk therapy. So I feel like it was right at those times when there was still stigma around going to a therapist or having a therapist or
Mm.
needing mental help, mental health help. And I write about it in the book because it's such a powerful turning point where I had, oh, there's so much in the backstory. I apologize for not having
You're right.
to be concise about it, but I essentially had studied abroad. I was studying abroad in China, so I was away for 4 months. And I came back, which in itself, getting adjusted to a whole different time zone, traveling all, from opposite hemispheres, just jumping
Yeah.
around the globe, trying to feel settled, you're jet lagged, you're loopy, you don't even know what's happening. And when I had arrived in the US, I was actually greeted really shockingly by the person who had assaulted me when I was like 18.
Oh.
So it was somebody that I never expected to see again. And not only
Mm.
was I seeing them again, but they were like my waiter at a restaurant that I was going to. And so I was mortified because I was,
Oh.
you, you're like, am I hallucinating this? Is this really what's actually happening? I couldn't believe it. So there was that kind of cruel irony where I joke that the book isn't haha funny. It's kind of like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me funny? Like you have to laugh because
Yeah.
it's so bonkers. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'd gotten through that experience, but right after, because I was back to back, I was coming back from that semester. I was headed to New York because I was dating someone at the time, and we were gonna spend New York in Times Square, and it was supposed to be the most romantic time in the world. And so I went from China to Minnesota to be reunited and had this shocking,
Mm.
confrontation, for lack of a better word. And then I had to be whisked immediately into what's supposed to be this big romantic New Year's in Times Square. And I'm like in PTSD mode. I am in like
Oh.
fight or flight. Now I'm worried in New York because there's all these people around that I'm having these fears and anxieties that I'm going to see this person again. Which is
Oh.
totally irrational because I
Yeah.
just saw them in Minnesota. I know they're not in New York, but I also didn't expect to see them there. So it's just this cycle that, like I said, feels like quicksand. So at that point, I just felt so much tension and so much tightness that I had to let everything out to that person I was dating. And I hadn't gone into, hey, let me tell you these traumas. But after the confrontation, I felt the need that I had to be vulnerable. I had to open up.
Mm.
And so, in the final stop on that horrible world tour of coming back from this supposed to be glorious study abroad experience, I landed back in Colorado, and that ex-boyfriend at the time that we spent in New York, he had just said he knew he was out of his depths. He was like, I'm not going to be able to fix this, but I think you should get some professional help. And I'm so thankful to the college that I was attending at the time in Colorado that they had resources on campus that was called the Phoenix Center at Auraria. And so coming to this culmination at the end of all these experiences of feeling emotionally drained, physically drained, my head is in a whirlwind, and I just kind of bared my soul to these therapists, the people who were there for my intake, and I just let it all out for them and got these recommendations. I walked out of that appointment and I looked down at my phone and I had a notification that I was the homepage of the college's website. So
No,
if you had
no.
typed in our college at the home, because weeks prior, they had brought film crew, like a TV, they were taking
Yeah.
pictures of us on campus in China. And so they had a picture of us all sitting at this cool Lama temple in Beijing, and it was the homepage of the university. And it felt like one of those things of like, I can't make this stuff up. And so I'm sending the link to my family to say, look at how cool this is. Like, this is amazing. I'm the homepage of the website. My photo's there. Right after I had just walked out of this therapist's
Yeah.
office with like resources of how to deal with this PTSD and this trauma. And so it reminded me of that juxtaposition so strongly in that moment. That's why it's the most prominent time that I remember, because I was like laughing out of joy to say,
Yeah.
I'm so proud of this. There are things I can be proud of, even though there are things that I may be ashamed of or things that are still hard for me to get over. But I have people who care about me enough to push me into therapy and enough to suggest this. And just the ridiculousness of being the cover photo
Yeah. I
in
must
that
say,
moment.
yeah, the snippets of your story are very intriguing. Your book's going to be a very good read, I can see. And I think I'll be laughing throughout it, going, are you serious? That happened out of
It's, you can't
all the
make this stuff
world.
up.
Yeah. That's actually right. You cannot make it up when it happens. So yeah, I'm looking forward to your book coming out. So Sarah, what would you say to someone listening who feels like there's no way out of their darkness?
Well, I definitely would say that I've been there before. I was
Mm,
in those moments where I had loved ones, just like I said, we're not alone. There are people
mm,
supporting us on this journey. And I had friends looking at me saying, you have to get out of this. And I would respond with, I know, but I don't know how. And I do feel like that is the loneliest feeling, to believe that you're alone on your path, or you believe that no amount of movement or action will get you out of that. And
mm,
it always depends on the situation that you're in, right? I can't say that giving up alcohol is going to solve everybody's problems, or, going to therapy. People have different things that they're dealing with. And so I think that processing and checking in with yourself, and my number one suggestion that I always like to say is just breathe.
yeah,
Because a lot of times in those moments when you are at the cusp, kind of when I feel like the water's up to here and your head is just kind of tilting up above it, um, it really feels like you can't breathe. And
yeah,
so to find those moments, maybe literally ground yourself,
mm,
feel, lay on your back on the ground and just take some deep breaths. It isn't going to solve your problem, so I'm not going to
no,
pretend like it would. But when we are healthier and when we are stronger, we are able to come at our problems with so much better strength than when we're so drained. And I just imagine people who, struggle with things like insomnia, and they're just so fried and they're so drained. You don't have the strength to do so many things because your body really can't recharge. So honestly, that reflection and listening to my body and what it needed, and not ignoring things when my body needs them. And sometimes they're pretty basic things, but we're so programmed to either keep working and being productive, or keep, healing and fixing yourself. Sometimes it's just actually doing nothing, like taking a bath,
yeah,
taking a walk, watching some videos online, not doom scrolling, but watching
yeah,
positive content for that kind of serotonin hit, and not the doom scroll.
yeah.
There's different ways to absorb media and get that checkpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're coming back to the point that I raised earlier, being kind to yourself, giving yourself that
Mm.
self-help and kindness in that space, in that area. Now, there was something that you said before that I was going to tap into, but I've forgotten about it. So anyway, it may come back to me. So how has this humor helped you to connect with others and break the stigma around mental health and trauma?
Well, I think that there's a lot of times, as I mentioned, with some of those near-death experiences and things that happened in my family, where humor was just the first reaction. You know, one of my near-death experience stories, unfortunately, is that I fell asleep at the wheel. And if that wasn't bad enough, I had cruise control on, going 55 miles per hour, which is, highway speeds. And what the joke that became through my family was, if you want a new car, let Sarah drive it, because I will total it and be able to walk away. And so, again, not haha funny, that kind of dark funny that just permeated through
Mm,
the family of, well, that's just what's expected, again, with that kind of loving black sheep type thing. So,
yeah.
in connecting with others, I feel like humor in the past, when I was drinking, when I was people pleasing, when I was in kind of this pattern following behavior and not pattern breaking behavior, at that time, what humor was, it was a way of reaching out and begging for affection, right? I wanted to be the class clown. I wanted people to like me. I wanted to get a punchline that wowed everybody. And it felt very fabricated. It felt very fake
Mm,
and inauthentic. It felt like I was acting, and you can be good at acting, and people can
mm,
respond to that, and people can like you, and they can, oh, they just think you're the best, and you're so gregarious. And
mm,
but it's not me, it's not real. And so when you heal and you become a different person, sometimes that inclination is to look at everything you did before and say, I want to do the opposite of it. If I was funny before, I'm going to be stoic and serious. And you feel like in order to heal, you have to be the opposite of yourself. And
mm,
instead, the way that I saw my transition of humor was, rather than being this puppet that would dance and be the punchline and be the dunce cap and be the jester, I said, well, I can incorporate humor. I'm still a person that loves a good punchline. I love, making people laugh and having authentic connection, but it's on my standards. It's on my time.
Yeah.
It's how I define it. So if I want to be ridiculous or wear a crazy costume, I do tons of cosplays, so I'm always in ridiculous costumes. If people follow me on social media, I'm a giant Pop-Tart. I was a
Yeah.
professional team's mascot before in the Giants costumes and stuff. So I definitely believe in not taking life too seriously. And like I said,
Mm.
going back to that whimsy, but
Yeah.
it's my definition of it and not
Yeah.
what I think is going to be funny to other people because I need them to laugh for validation. But
Yeah.
it's just, I guess I'm kind of a funny person. So
Yeah. You're really with your inner child, aren't you?
yes.
Yeah, I know what I was going to say before in regards to what you mentioned around breathing, that it's not
Mm.
going to fix the issue, but it's going to actually help you calm your nervous system, which leads into this next question is what practices or mindsets helps you stay grounded and joyful today?
I definitely do the grounding. Like I mentioned, I actually have a
Mm,
little pillow in my office where if I'm just tired of the screens, if I just need a break from, I'm a remote worker, so this is my all day, every day, a lot of the time. So when I need that break, I need to stretch. I just need to calm myself down, or I'm feeling tension, or, I work in HR, so occasionally things
mm,
get me all anxious. I just go take it doesn't have to be timed, it doesn't have to be serious or overly structured. I just go lay down. Maybe I'll edit some videos on my phone while I'm reclining like that. Um, and also, I actually keep a running list in my phone that I just started maybe a few weeks ago. But the note in my phone is self-care. It's titled Self-Care That Doesn't Look Like Self-Care. And I think I'll
mm,
eventually make it some kind of download for my newsletter people. But the idea is that we have this probably overly capitalistic view of what self-care is and should be, that it's all baths and lotions and bath bombs and massages and spa days, and that if that can be an element of self-care, I definitely don't doubt that. But there are little
yeah,
things that I now think of as I'm on this journey to love myself more and respect myself more and be gentler with myself, is that I look at little things that I do for myself as self-care. For
mhm,
somebody who deals with chronic pain or has mobility issues, who, works on things and has decision anxiety. So it could be as simple as I pick the next day's outfit the night before and it's
yeah,
already ready for me so that when I wake up, boom, there it's there. Or the fact that sometimes I get lazy and I just slip my shoes off and I don't untie the shoes. And it's a gift to my future self to untie those laces so that the
mm,
next time I need to put my shoes in, I'm not all angry that my knots are there. Little things like that that you could look at and go, well, that's just, the existence, that's the mundane. But isn't that the whimsy of it? Is to look at those things
mm,
that we have to do all the time and say, well, that's a little gift to myself that I'm going to make
yeah,
overnight oats. So I wake up in the morning and I have breakfast already made for me because night Sarah got it ready for morning Sarah. And
yeah,
there's this kind of gentle relationship or of, what are things that I do because I'm being kind to myself for no other reason. Nobody's watching. I'm not filming it. It's not content, but it's, yeah, just ways that you give yourself what you need because you
mm.
you are actually honest about what you need.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you address the part about self-care isn't just about going to spas or having the bath. It's, making sure you drink water every day to keep you
Mhm.
hydrated so you feel good. Just those little things that's going to, let you shine brighter each day. So I love what you said then. So in your own words, what does healing look like when it's messy but real?
Well, I think that is exactly what sobriety has felt like to me. That's a
Mm,
perfect messy but real because, like I said, it's not a light switch. It's not binary. I like to think of things that are very clear and, check yes or no. Did I do this? I'm a little bit robotic and I love when things are checked off and it can feel like it's done. And so it feels like alcohol, removing it from your life is binary because you can look at something and say this either has alcohol in it or it doesn't. But healing is nowhere close to that. Sobriety feels like
mm,
that. Healing doesn't. And when you're left with the actual things to work through, the reason it's messy is because our inclination to jump to that muscle memory of reactions to such small things. It's like anxiety, right? I have a very logical fiance. He's a
Mm,
wonderfully logical man. And so when I get anxious, he'll look at me and kind of be like, well, why, you know better. You know that this is not
mm,
XYZ. There's no reason to. And I take a deep breath and I go, sweetheart, of course I know XYZ. I agree with you, but I still feel
mm,
these, because that's really what I'm trying to say is you're right. I agree with you, but I'm
mm,
dealing with this stuff. And when I have to apologize, which even learning to apologize, if you don't grow up in a family where that's modeled for you, that authentic apologies are just thrown around, that's kind of clunky, that's kind of awkward, and you're constantly apologizing for behaviors and they sound like excuses. And I really appreciate and I'm so grateful for my fiance and his patience
mm,
and him having this terrible front row seat that I'm sure he never wanted to my healing. But he's very intuitive. And even when I don't think that he's actually listening and picking up on the things, he is. And he'll catch me off guard with some insightful comments of, you know, well, you relate to this character because you don't feel heard. And I was like, oh, you do. You are listening to the things that I drone on about, or I
yeah.
feel like I'm just wallowing in repeatedly. So I feel like for those who are on the journey of loving themselves more, it's twofold because it's inward in loving yourself more, and it's actually external, but not for validation, but for trusting others. And I think that that is where people struggle because they've been hurt so many times before. That's what I did when I think about that jaded bitterness that I had gotten to when I was that husk of a person. But I was in a space where I was still trusting people in that old chaotic pattern, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, I was expecting the worst from my partner because he was cheating on me and he was doing all these horrible things. And so, when I'm in this relationship, of course, my first inclination is to protect myself and be defensive because I'm so
Yeah.
used to people saying that they love me and then still hurting me and finding that okay. And that
Mm,
pattern and looking at that and going, oh, not only am I done with that and those people, but in this relationship where I see love and he's not hurting me, I have to allow that space to be authentic and not constantly be the person who's, what do they call it? It's that word when if you think it's going to happen. And so that it's not confirmation bias, but it's essentially like
when you
just,
manifest it, or
yeah, almost like manifesting now. I
yeah,
feel like that's what it gets to, but
yeah,
um, it's just not ruining it before it's bad. And I think
yeah,
that sometimes you just are so expecting that it's going to end up you're waiting for the shoe to drop. But then what kind of
mm,
partner are you being if you're always being skeptical or judgmental or
yeah,
defensive and snippy? So I feel like it's taken a while, but watching that healing. And the other thing, the reason why I think it's so messy and people struggle with their healing journey is that there's no end. Not to be, again, nihilistic or anything, but you're constantly always healing and
mm,
always working on things because the maybe the cruel joke and again kind of that dark humor is that even when you're healed, you still procrastinate, you
yeah,
still get frustrated, you still deal with traffic and deal with people being slow at the bank, and so you still have these stimuli that it's not about closing yourself off and living in this bubble where nothing bad is going to happen to me because that's kind of ignorant to think that that even exists. It's the fact that you become stronger with all the things that you're carrying, with the lessons, which I know that's kind of an eye roll of people saying that these things are all lessons that are here to teach you something. But really, after these experiences, if you don't learn from them, they're bound to repeat themselves. So once
absolutely.
you've acknowledged it and
Mm,
you find the pattern, then you can start to say, well, I'm going to be living my life in this way, which means that when this does happen, I'm going to approach it in a different way, or I'm not going to engage in it like this, or I'm not going to put my fist through a wall or smash a plate because that's not who I am. That's not who I
yeah.
want to be. And I don't have to do the things that were modeled for me.
Mm. So just on that, Sarah, you mentioned that you're referred to as the black sheep in the past. What word captures your current season of life?
Well, what I love, the visual that I love to use about where I am now is really that butterfly,
Yeah.
and it's been so reflective because that cocoon is the darkness, right? That's when
Mm,
we're all closed up It's claustrophobic, it's tight, it's murky, it's gunky, there it's
Yeah.
sticky. But then you don't stay there forever. And going back to your recommendation for people who feel like they're never going to get out of that cocoon, you do. You break out of it.
Mm,
And before you know it, you are breaking out of it. But it's also your choice when you start to break out of it. Do you just stay there looking at the light and make no movement, or do you actually crawl out? And I feel like for honestly about the last 6 years, because it's the length of the relationship I've been in as of December, but as you crawl out of that cocoon, you're kind of pulling the goop with you, right? When you think of that visual as that butterfly is
mm,
crawling out of it, there's still sticky clumps of that cocoon stuck to the wings. And so in your mind, it's like having the anxiety, like I just said, right? My logical mind
mm,
would be like, I'm a butterfly. I am out of this cocoon. I don't need this cocoon anymore, but you're still crawling out of it and have those remnants.
yeah.
And I feel like that's the evolution. And there's also that kind of bittersweet thing that they say that a butterfly can never see its wings, so it doesn't know how
Yes.
beautiful it is. So a
Hmm.
little bit of the reminder of where we are, but to look back on ourselves and see the progress of what you have become.
Mm. No, that's so right. It's so beautiful. I love that saying about the butterfly doesn't know how beautiful it is because it can't see its wings. I always refer to that one. So, Sarah, do you have a song that instantly lifts your mood?
Oh, that's a good one. I have not thought about that. There's what I will say is that there's an artist that has been on repeat that's really helped me throughout my journey. I listen to her on Spotify, and her name is Toni Jones, and it's Toni Jones, and she's kind of a like an affirmation singer. And
Oh,
I actually have a reel that I have drafted up that I'll be posting that talks about how much her music has really influenced me. And sometimes I'll even catch myself throughout the day when things are challenging. I'll actually be saying the lyrics in my head,
mm,
and they're all different kinds of reminders. The songs are all different affirmations, and
hmm.
some of them are more focused on work. Some of them are more focused on financial stability or purpose.
Yeah,
But I think what's beautiful about it is it seems very accessible. Like if I was just like had it in my speaker and then somebody heard it, it
yeah.
doesn't sound like, yoga, meditative, Zen type
Mm,
music. It's like kind of peppy and hip hoppy and stuff. And I love it. And so whenever my friends are on similar paths and journeys, I'll kind of subtly be like, I don't know what you like listening to, but you should listen to her because this song is really calling out to me for that
mm.
purpose.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure our listeners will be looking Tony Jones up as well. So, Sarah, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work to follow your journey towards your book release?
Yeah, well, I actually just launched up a whole bunch of different things surrounding the book. So they can find me on Instagram at my full name, Sarah Marie Shulak, which they can get the
Hmm.
spelling down in the corner there. So it'll be sarahmarieshulak.com is the website, but it's also that Instagram handle is the same, Sarah Marie Shulak. And for those who might have Substack, that's been a new platform that I've been able to utilize some of the writing that didn't end up in the book. So that's a nice push for people to follow on Substack because you'll get exclusive content that won't be written in the book. And I don't push that content onto other platforms. So you
Hmm.
just have to be on there to see it. And if you're more into the art and the creative things and seeing my crazy costumes, if you take my last name and spell it backwards, Kaluos, that's actually my art name, the pseudonym that I go by because I always joke that art was the opposite of what my family wanted me to do.
Well, I'm sure our listeners will be looking you up on, yeah, looking you up backwards and also forwards.
Yes.
So, Sarah, if you could go back and speak to the version of yourself who was ready to give up, what would you tell her now?
I feel like you're gonna make me cry right at the end, but I think I just hug her first because I feel like
Mm,
that's probably what she needed more than anything in that moment. Um,
yeah.
just being present and being gentle and understanding, because I feel like everybody jumps to chastise and jumps to lecture, and so I feel like the
Mm,
first thing would be just the gentleness, and then kind of remind her that it gets better, not to be
yeah.
cliche, it really does get better, but also looking back at all those behaviors that the people pleasing and the, humor to get affection, which I thought was, attention was affection, which it wasn't, and all of those things that it just wasn't worth it. Like do it for you, and your heart.
Oh, no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Sarah. Well, Sarah's story reminds us that healing doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. Through honesty, humor, and heart, she shows us how to find light even in the darkest places, and how laughter can be an act of rebellion and hope. So, thank you for sharing your stories here with us today, Sarah.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it.
No, we've welcomed your stories, and I'm eager to look up this book because just your snippets, I was laughing in my head. I've got that black humor myself, being nursing background, so I understand it. You
Yeah.
wouldn't believe it. Yeah, so
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you very much.
I appreciate it.
Mm. And this is Positive Vibes with Nikki Dennis. Until next time, may you face your storms with courage, find your laughter through healing, and never forget you are not broken, you are becoming. Sending you all love and positive vibes. Bye for now.